Welcome back to Tell Me More Stories Told This podcast. Are you ready for a story that, well, it starts with utopian dreams and ends in, honestly, one of the most chilling events of the 20th century?
The Jonestown Massacre.
Yeah, the Jonestown Massacre. It's a story that asks us to consider how charisma and idealism can take a dark turn, leading hundreds of people down a path of no return.
What's fascinating about Jonestown is how it challenges our assumptions about cults and their followers. These weren't just naive or easily manipulated individuals.
Right.
Many were drawn to Jim Jones's message because they genuinely believed in his vision of social justice and equality.
You're right. It's easy to dismiss the people of Jonestown as somehow different from us, but their story forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about human nature,
Exactly.
about our own capacity for belief and belonging.
Jones was a master at tapping into those deep human needs. He started preaching in Indiana in the 1950s. And what's intriguing is that he was initially drawn to figures like Stalin.
Stalin.
Yeah, advocating for what he called apostolic socialism.
Apostolic socialism. Wow, that's a term I haven't heard before.
Right.
What did that even mean in practice?
It was a unique blend of religious fervor and a radical commitment to social equality. Imagine a community where racial and economic barriers were dissolved, where everyone worked together for a common good, all under the guidance of a charismatic leader who claimed to have divine inspiration.
Okay.
It was a potent mix, especially for those who felt marginalized or disillusioned by mainstream society.
So it was this message that drew people to the People's Temple.
Absolutely. And the temple's move to California in 1965 proved to be a turning point. They gained significant influence in San Francisco, even playing a crucial role in George Moscone's mayoral victory in 1975. Moscone then appointed Jones as the chairman of the San Francisco Housing Authority. It was a sign of how deeply embedded the temple had become in the city's power structure.
Oh, wow, that's incredible. It sounds like they were on the verge of achieving real political clout. But then there were those whispers of a darker side, right?
Yes.
Allegations of abuse and financial irregularities started to surface.
Yes, and as those accusations grew louder, Jones became increasingly paranoid. He began to see enemies everywhere, believing that the outside world was conspiring against him and his followers.
Oh, wow.
This paranoia, coupled with his vision of a socialist utopia free from external threats, led them to Guyana in 1973.
Guyana. So Jonestown was born, but why Guyana? What made this remote jungle settlement so appealing to Jones?
Guyana at the time was seen as a socialist haven, a place where the temple could flourish free from outside interference. But there was another, more strategic reason for Jones's choice.
Okay, I'm really intrigued. What was this strategic advantage?
Guyana had a long-standing territorial dispute with Venezuela. Jones skillfully leveraged this fear, emphasizing to the Guyanese government that an American presence near their disputed border would act as a deterrent against Venezuelan aggression.
Wow, so he was playing a geopolitical game using the temple as a pawn to secure his own position.
Precisely. Jones was a master manipulator, able to exploit the anxieties and ambitions of those in power. And for a time, it seemed like his gamble had paid off. Jonestown, in its early days, held the promise of a genuine utopia. Imagine a community working together, building homes, cultivating the land, and striving for a common goal.
It sounds almost idyllic. Did everyone genuinely believe in this utopia, or were there cracks in the facade from the start?
That's a question that historians still debate. While some residents were undoubtedly true believers, there were others who harbored doubts or even feared Jones's growing power. But dissent was dangerous in Jonestown. Jones had created an environment where questioning his authority was met with swift and brutal punishment.
It's a reminder that even in seemingly utopian communities, the dynamics of power and control can quickly turn sinister.
Exactly. And as more and more temple members migrated from California to Jonestown in 1977, the settlement became overcrowded, resources were stretched thin, and the atmosphere began to shift.
This is where the story takes a darker turn, right? We start to see the introduction of bizarre rituals, the White Nights, the talk of revolutionary suicide.
The White Nights were particularly chilling. Imagine being roused in the dead of night, surrounded by armed guards, and given the choice between suicide fleeing into the jungle or facing an imaginary enemy. These were drills rehearsals for what Jones called revolutionary suicide, but they highlight the level of control he exerted over his followers.
Wow, it's hard to believe that people would willingly participate in something so terrifying. What was going through their minds?
Fear, undoubtedly, but also perhaps a strange sense of comfort in knowing that their fate, however grim, was shared by their community. Jones had effectively isolated them from the outside world, making them dependent on him for their physical and emotional well-being.
Before we delve further into this descent into darkness, Let me just remind all of you listening to hit that subscribe button. We have many more captivating stories waiting for you right here on Tell Me More, so don't miss out.
These White Nights drills weren't just for show. Jones was already preparing for a much darker outcome. In 1976, Jones began ordering large quantities of cyanide, ostensibly for cleaning gold.
Cleaning gold with cyanide.
Yeah. But the sheer volume of the orders raised red flags. It became clear that Jones was not simply preparing for a worst-case scenario, but actively planning for a mass suicide.
Oh, wow. That's chilling. It's like he was setting the stage for a final act, a tragic culmination of his paranoia and control.
You're right. And amidst this growing darkness, a custody battle was brewing over a child named John Stone. His parents, former Temple members, were desperately trying to get him back from Jonestown. And this legal fight would prove to be a catalyst for the tragedy that unfolded.
This custody battle led to the formation of the concerned relatives, right, a group of family members who were increasingly worried about their loved ones inside Jonestown.
Yes. And the concerned relatives played a critical role in bringing the horrors of Jonestown to light. They started raising awareness about the abuses happening within the temple, lobbying politicians and the media to investigate Jonestown. One of those politicians was Congressman Leo Ryan, who, spurred on by the concerned relatives, embarked on a fact-finding mission to Jonestown in November 1978. It was a bold move, one that would ultimately cost him his life.
It's almost hard to imagine what it must have been like for Ryan and his delegation arriving in Jonestown. Did they realize the danger they were walking into?
Initially, they were met with a warm reception. It was a carefully orchestrated performance designed to convince them that all was well in Jonestown. There were smiling faces, singing, and speeches about the joys of communal living. But beneath this facade, tensions were simmering.
Some residents must have seen Ryan's visit as their chance to escape.
Exactly. That evening, Vernon Gosney and Monica Bagby slipped a note to NBC reporter Dawn Harris pleading for help to leave Jonestown. It was a desperate act of courage, a crack in the carefully constructed illusion.
What a tense moment that must have been for Ryan and his delegation, realizing that the situation was far more complex and dangerous than they initially thought.
The next day, things escalated rapidly. More temple members, emboldened by Gosney and Bagby's plea, decided to defect. They packed their belongings and joined Ryan's entourage, ready to leave Jonestown behind.
I can only imagine the conflicting emotions they must have been feeling. The fear, the hope, the uncertainty as they prepared to board those planes.
The atmosphere at the Port Katuma airstrip was thick with anticipation and anxiety. But as Ryan's party started boarding, tragedy struck.
This is the moment when everything changes, the point of no return.
Armed members of the temple's Red Brigade arrived in a tractor and trailer, opening fire on the departing group. It was a chaotic and terrifying scene. Congressman Ryan, several journalists, and one of the defecting temple members were killed. Others were wounded, scrambling for cover amidst the gunfire.
Wow. It's heartbreaking to picture those final moments at the airstrip. The violence, the sheer desperation. How did anyone survive that attack?
Some managed to escape into the jungle during the chaos, while others hid, pretending to be dead, or simply by chance being overlooked. The stories of these survivors offer a glimpse of hope amidst the darkness, a testament to the human will to survive, even in the face of unimaginable horror. But back in Jonestown, the news of the airstrip shooting sent shockwaves through the community. Jones, his paranoia reaching its peak, declared that it was time for the final act, what he called revolutionary suicide.
He called it revolutionary suicide. But in reality, it was mass murder. He'd been preparing for this moment for years.
Inside the pavilion, a large metal tub filled with cyanide-laced flavor aid was prepared. Jones urged his followers to drink the poison, telling them that death was preferable to the horrors that awaited them at the hands of their enemies.
We have the so-called death tape from that day, right?
Yeah.
A chilling audio recording to even imagine existing. What does it reveal about those final moments?
It's a haunting document. On the tape, you can hear the cries of children, the pleas of those who hesitated, the chilling calm of Jones's voice as he orchestrated this horrific event. It's hard to listen to, but it provides a glimpse into the fear, confusion, and despair that permeated the pavilion as hundreds of people, including over 300 children, were led to their deaths.
It's impossible to truly grasp the scale of the tragedy. Over 900 people died that day in Jonestown. What about Jim Jones himself? How did he die?
Jones was found dead in the pavilion with a gunshot wound to the head. Whether it was self-inflicted or at the hands of one of his followers remains a subject of debate to this day.
It's a horrific end to a story that began with such hope and promise. It's hard to reconcile the idealistic beginnings of the People's Temple with the horrific events that unfolded in Jonestown.
That's the real tragedy of Jonestown, isn't it? It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that even the most well-intentioned movements can be corrupted by power, paranoia, and fear.
What lessons can we learn from Jonestown? What insights can help us understand how such a tragedy could occur and hopefully prevent such things from happening again?
Jonestown wasn't just about a charismatic leader or a group of misguided followers. It was a confluence of factors: social alienation, economic hardship, racial tensions, political opportunism, and a yearning for a better world. Jones was a master at exploiting those vulnerabilities, offering a sense of belonging and purpose that many found irresistible.
Yeah, it's easy to look back and judge the people who followed Jones, but we have to remember the historical context. This was a time of great social upheaval, the Civil Rights Movement, the Vietnam War, a growing distrust of authority. Many people were searching for answers for a community that shared their values.
And Jones provided that, at least initially. He created an environment where people felt valued, where they were told they were part of something bigger than themselves. But as his power grew, so did his paranoia and his need for control.
The events at Jonestown also highlight the dangers of groupthink and the importance of critical thinking. Jones created an echo chamber where dissent was silenced, or questioning his authority was seen as a betrayal.
You're absolutely right. Jones surrounded himself with loyalists who reinforced his worldview, and he systematically isolated those who dared to challenge him. This created a culture of fear and obedience that made it nearly impossible for anyone to speak out against him, even as his behavior became increasingly erratic and dangerous.
So what can we do to prevent something like Jonestown from happening again?
Well, I think it starts with education. We need to teach people about the dangers of cults and how to recognize the warning signs of manipulation and abuse. We need to foster critical thinking skills and encourage people to question authority, even when it comes from someone they admire or trust.
And it's not just about cults. These lessons apply to all aspects of our lives, from our personal relationships to our political choices. We need to be aware of how easily we can be influenced by those in positions of power and how important it is to think for ourselves.
Exactly. Jonestown serves as a stark reminder that blind faith and unquestioning obedience can have devastating consequences. It's a tragedy that we must never forget, but also one that we can learn from.
It's a sobering thought, but a necessary one. Thank you for sharing your insights with us today. This has been a deeply unsettling but incredibly important conversation.
I agree. Thank you for having me.
And to all of you listening out there, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the dark heart of Jonestown. We hope you found it insightful and thought-provoking. Remember, critical thinking is more important than ever in today's world. Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep telling each other more.